So once again, I'm going to pull from direct statistics from our community to illustrate the point. So while being blocked feels totally horrible, it's actually not as bad as you think, which is maybe a very bold statement, but take a look at this. A few years ago, I polled our community and basically asked them the following question. For those of you who've been in a situation where your exes blocked you, did they at one point unblock you? Close to 70% of the recipients or respondents of this poll basically said, yeah, my ex unblocked me at some point. So this lends credence to this idea that most of the time, to the tune of 70%, an ex blocking you is more of a in-the-moment tantrum than it is a long-term strategy. Does that necessarily mean that your ex will unblock you? Obviously not. There are no guarantees. But if you play the stats, being blocked isn't actually the worst thing in the world. So hopeless reason number 4 is basically getting to the point at some point during no contact where you feel like this just is not going to work. Now, I've been doing this for over 10 years, and that means I've been writing about no contact for 10 years. There's not a lot that ultimately has changed. I've watched people succeed with it. I've watched people fail with it. But if you're looking at the overall experience of a no contact rule, not much has changed from the moment I started writing about it. I'll give you an example. So here's the experience that most people kind of go through when they start a no contact rule. They start off really pumped up to try it out. You know, they hear about it, they're excited about it, then they try it and don't get an immediate response, which is kind of the unnatural assumption that most people have when they try a no contact rule. And when they don't get that immediate response, they get kind of depressed. But maybe at some point along the way, one thing goes right for them and they kind of get out of that depression wallow for a little bit until their ex doesn't respond to them, or they see that their ex is on a date with someone else, or their ex has posted something that triggers their cortisol, that makes them more stressed, and they're back into that stress moment. Then fear takes hold. They start worrying if they move on to someone else, what am I going to do? And this creates this downward spiral. But at some point, at some stinking point, almost everyone goes through this period where they think there's no way this is going to work. Even after seeing maybe all the success stories in the community or the success stories online or on YouTube and all the experts recommending no contact, when you're actually in the experience, it can feel like it's not going to work, that it's going to fail. Here's what I say. I think 99% of the people who are stuck in this downward spiral completely miss the point of the way we teach the no contact rule. The most important part of the no contact rule is not about focusing on your ex. It's about focusing on yourself, which is kind of a cliche thing to say. It's about outgrowing an ex. Giving up on this idea of trying to get an ex back and instead focusing on the Trinity concept, improving health, improving wealth, improving relationships outside of your ex. If you do those things, it's actually impossible that the no contact rule won't work. And I think that's what people constantly get wrong about it. They expect this psychological reactance factor to cause the ex to reach out to them and beg for them back, but that's actually not how it works. That's not how the average success story works. In fact, when you talk to the success stories, when you just go to my podcast right now, listen to some of the success stories, the one common theme you see between most success stories is they got to this place where they outgrew their ex. They got to this place where they were okay with not getting their ex back, and that's when it started clicking, and that's when everything started working for them. And that leads us to the final lost hope reason, and that's being stuck on what your ex said during the breakup. And usually it's going to be some variation of, we're not right together, we're never going to get back together, I never loved you at all. And I think the challenge is when you replay this in your head, it almost becomes this narrative. It becomes what you believe that your ex assumes about you. And the irony is you're often left to reconcile what they said versus your actual experience with them when you were happy in the relationship. For example, your ex says, I never loved you. But your brain starts going back to all of the things that you did together, all of the times that they said that they loved you, and you're confused and it's just frustrating and it causes you to lose hope. And the number one question usually for people who are stuck on the last thing that your ex said during a breakup is, did they mean it? So here's what I always say to my clients who ask me that. Yes, they did mean it in the moment. And that in the moment is the most important, key, critical piece of information. Given enough time, given enough space, our perceptions on memories and past change. When you go through a breakup, it's a highly emotionally charged topic. There's a lot of highly emotional thoughts that you're having. But when I personally think back to my breakups with my first or second girlfriend, if you were to ask me in the moment during the breakup, I would have pointed to that person and said they're the worst person ever. Yet when I think back now, give it enough time, give it enough space, I didn't really mean that. In fact, I feel guilty about some of the things I did, my contributions for why the relationship ended. Perspective is important. So here's what I say to people who are too caught up on what their ex's narrative is. Yeah, they feel that maybe right now, but in a few months' time, that's going to shift. And we've actually heard this from real success stories who have talked to their exes, who have literally point blank said, hey, you said you didn't love me anymore. What was that all about? And they say something along the lines of, well, you know, at the moment I felt that way, but it wasn't until I left and realized that the grass wasn't so green on the other side that I realized I messed up.